Ambassador Jimmer, President Obama said today that this is a good deal, which he says would, and I quote, would cut off every pathway that Iran could take to develop a nuclear weapon. What's your reaction to that?
It doesn't cut off the pathways for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. It actually paves a path for Iran to have a nuclear weapon after about a decade. There are many problems with this deal. The first one is it leaves a vast nuclear infrastructure in place. You know, we were told a couple years ago that the deal that we're going to get is one that's going to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, and then they would dismantle the sanctions regime. What's happening here, Anderson, is they're dismantling the sanctions regime and leaving Iran with a pretty big nuclear program. The second problem, Anderson, is that this is a temporary deal. The constraints that Iran is agreeing to are temporary. The major constraints are removed.
There's a 10-year expiration, you mean?
Yeah, and in 10 years, the major constraint, which is around the centrifuges, is removed. Now, the president himself said a couple months ago, you know, the big fear is what happens in year 13 and 14 when the breakout time goes down to zero. That's exactly right. The problem is you're putting temporary constraints today on Iran getting a nuclear weapon in the next decade, but you're freeing them to get nuclear weapons in the future. That's why we say it doesn't block Iran's path to the bomb, it paves it. And just one last thing, Anderson, which is the main problem. There is no linkage in this deal between Iran's behavior and the removal of the constraints on their nuclear program. There's no linkage. 4 days ago, the president of Iran was in a rally where people were burning American and Israeli flags, chanting death to America and death to Israel. That wasn't 40 years ago. It wasn't 4 years ago. It was 4 days ago. So Iran has no incentive to change. And you've just made a terrorist regime much richer today, and you're going to allow them, after a decade, to have a huge enrichment infrastructure to make many nuclear bombs. This is a disaster.
I know that obviously the president spoke to your prime minister earlier on the phone, and the president reportedly said that the United States is going to, and I quote, continue our unprecedented efforts to strengthen Israel's security efforts that go beyond what any American administration has done before. You've obviously been in touch with Israeli officials. I'm wondering what their reaction is to that. Do you buy that?
We appreciate everything that this president has done for Israel's security, and he has done many things that are known about and many things that are not known about. But we have a serious disagreement over this issue. The president of the United States believes this makes Israel safer. We think it endangers, it threatens the survival of Israel. And this is something shared across the Israeli spectrum, between right and left. Everyone in Israel thinks this is a bad deal. And our Arab neighbors think this is a bad deal. And Anderson, when Israelis and Arabs are on the same page, that happens about once a century. People should pay attention and ask themselves why your allies in the region, those who are most endangered, those who are most vulnerable, why they are telling you that this is a bad deal. We live there.
What would you like to see? I mean, is there any way that Iran can be a nuclear country, in your opinion?
What we would like to see is a much better deal. The Prime Minister spoke about it when he came to the United States a few months ago, one that would actually reduce the infrastructure, the vast nuclear infrastructure that Iran is being left with, and one, most importantly, Anderson, that would link Iran, the removal of the constraints on Iran's nuclear program to a change in Iran's behavior. If Iran becomes a normal country, if they stop terrorism around the globe, they're the foremost sponsor of terrorism around the globe, if they stop that, if they stop gobbling up their Arab neighbors, and they currently control 4 Arab capitals, if they stop calling for the annihilation of Israel and working toward the annihilation of Israel, then remove those constraints. But if they're going to continue all of this aggression and all this terror, you can't put them on automatic pilot to have nuclear weapons. That's a disaster.
Mr. Ambassador, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.